There is a particular kind of person who remembers two worlds, not metaphorically, literally. They remember running through neighborhoods until the sky turned orange and the streetlights flickered on. They also remember typing out their first screen name on a clunky desktop computer, choosing something ridiculous and feeling like they just unlocked a secret door to a new universe. They grew up looking things up in actual encyclopedias. They also learned to pirate music before they fully understood what pirating meant. They had a childhood that existed entirely offline. Then they grew up, and the world went online. And they went with it. If you were born somewhere in the 1990s, this is your story. You exist in a category that has no clean label. You're not quite the millennial that pop culture loves to mock. You're not Gen Z, the generation that grew up with a screen already in their hand. You're something in between, something that doesn't fit neatly into any box researchers, marketers, or sociologists have tried to build. You are the last generation to have a childhood that was entirely analog, and the first generation to come of age in a world being completely reshaped by technology. That gap, that strange in-between space you occupied, did something to your psychology that most people never fully examine. Researchers have started calling it something, but before we get to the name, let's sit inside the experience for a moment. It's a Saturday morning sometime in the late 90s. You're somewhere between 6 and 10 years old. You wake up before your parents do, not because anyone set an alarm, but because you know the cartoons are on, and missing even 5 minutes feels like a personal tragedy. You pour cereal into a bowl, sit cross-legged on the carpet in front of the television, and for the next 2 hours, nothing else in the world exists. There is no algorithm choosing what you watch next. There is no pause button. There is no streaming library offering you 10,000 alternatives. There is only what's on right now, and you are completely, totally, effortlessly present for it. After that, you go outside, not because a parent scheduled outdoor time, not because a screen time limit kicked in. You go outside because that is simply what children did. You find other kids, or you don't, and either way you invent something to do. A stick becomes a weapon in an imaginary war, an empty field becomes a stadium, the space between two trees becomes a fortress. Nobody taught you how to play. Nobody needed to. Boredom arrived and imagination filled it automatically. Research shows that children in the 90s spent somewhere between 3 and 4 hours outside each day on average. Today, that number has collapsed to under 30 minutes. A major health study found that more than 80% of today's adolescents don't come close to meeting recommended physical activity levels. But you were there for the last era when outdoor, unstructured, unsupervised play was simply the default mode of childhood. You didn't experience it as a gift, you just lived it. And without realizing it, you developed something that's quietly rare now: the ability to generate meaning and entertainment from nothing. Creativity that comes not from stimulation, but from the absence of it. Then the transition happened. And this is where your story gets genuinely unusual, because you didn't just grow up in one world. You lived through the death of one world and the birth of another in real time, during the years your brain was still forming. You remember VHS tapes, the specific ritual of rewinding them before returning them to the video store because the sticker on the case told you to be kind and rewind. You remember when DVDs arrived and felt almost supernatural by comparison. You used dial-up internet. You remember that sound, that grinding, screeching handshake sound of a connection being established, and then the experience of watching a single web page load line by line, top to bottom, like a curtain being drawn in slow motion. By high school, broadband had arrived and everything accelerated. In elementary school, some of you touched actual typewriters. By middle school, you were writing papers in word processing software. You spent real hours in libraries, navigating card catalogs, pulling encyclopedias off shelves, writing down information by hand. Then computers arrived in classrooms, and the card catalog became irrelevant almost overnight. Linguists sometimes talk about people who grow up bilingual as having a unique cognitive flexibility, an ability to move between two systems of meaning that monolingual speakers simply don't have access to. What you developed was something equivalent, except instead of two languages, it was two entirely different relationships with information, with communication, with reality itself. You are analog native and digitally fluent. That combination will never exist again. The generation born after you never had an analog foundation to build from. The generation born before you never fully crossed into digital fluency. You are the only ones who genuinely inhabit both, and nowhere is that more visible in what happened to your privacy. Before social media, your embarrassing moments belonged only to the people who witnessed them. If you said something stupid at a party or tripped in the school hallway or went through a deeply questionable fashion phase, only the people physically present carried that memory. There was no footage, there was no upload, there was no permanent, searchable, shareable record of your worst moments. You got to grow up, figure out who you were, change your mind, reinvent yourself, and move on without documentation. You got to be a mess in private. That freedom, that privacy of becoming, is something no generation after yours will ever experience. Then MySpace appeared when you were a teenager. Facebook opened to everyone while you were in high school or just entering college. Instagram emerged as you stepped into early adulthood. And slowly, without fully understanding what was happening, you learned a new set of skills nobody explicitly taught you. How to present yourself, how to curate your life, how to perform authenticity while simultaneously engineering how you appeared to others, how to measure your worth in the currency of likes and comments and follower counts. Your psychology got pulled in two directions at once. One part of you was formed in a world where identity was built privately, through experience, through failure, through genuine connection. The other part of you learned to exist publicly, to frame everything as content, to feel the low hum of anxiety that arrives when you post something and the response is smaller than you hoped. You weren't built for that second world, but you adapted to it anyway, because you had no choice. And if you're enjoying this exploration of what shaped you, take a second right now to subscribe and leave a like. This channel exists to help people understand the psychological patterns running underneath their lives. And if that resonates with you, staying connected means you won't miss what's coming next. Now, here's the part that's harder to sit with. A large-scale study out of the University of California examined data from more than 27,000 adults and arrived at a finding that is difficult to read if you were born in the 90s. People from this generation report worse mental health outcomes than any previous generation measured. Rates of depression, anxiety, and related conditions are significantly elevated compared to those born in the decade before, and the research suggests these conditions worsen rather than stabilize over time. The easy explanation is technology, and technology is certainly part of it, but the deeper issue is the collision. You were raised inside a value system that taught you that real relationships are built through shared physical experience, that self-worth comes from what you actually do and who you actually are, that connection means presence, not performance. And then the world shifted underneath you, and suddenly relationships were being conducted through screens, self-worth was being quantified publicly, and presence had been replaced by documentation. You didn't get to choose which world to live in. You got both simultaneously, and the contradiction between them is exhausting in a way that's hard to articulate and easy to misunderstand as personal weakness. You're not struggling because something is wrong with you. You're navigating a tension that no generation before you has ever had to navigate at this scale. But here is what the research also shows, and this part matters. Because you remember what life felt like before constant connectivity, you have access to something genuinely valuable. You know what it feels like to be bored without a device to reach for. You know what it feels like to wait, to be patient, to experience something without immediately needing to share it with anyone. You know what presence feels like because you lived inside it for years before you had an alternative. That knowledge doesn't disappear. It lives somewhere in you, and it gives you the ability to choose in a way that truly digital native generations cannot because they have no comparison point. You can put the phone down at dinner and actually mean it. You can take a trip and resist the urge to document every moment of it. You can sit in silence without it feeling like a punishment. These are not small things. In the current landscape, these are genuinely rare capacities, and you have them because you were shaped by a world that required them. You also carry something that makes you uniquely valuable in the spaces you move through every day. You can translate. You understand the concerns of older generations who feel left behind by technology because you remember the world they're mourning. You understand the fluency of younger generations who have never known anything else because you learned that fluency yourself. At work, in families, in communities, you are often the one standing in the middle, making sense of each side to the other. That's not an accident. That's a product of exactly the kind of childhood you had. Today, people born in the 90s are somewhere in their mid-20s to mid-30s. You're deep inside real life now. Careers, relationships, decisions that actually matter.